The dust on the perimeter of Outpost 4 never really settles. It hangs in the air, a constant, gritty suspension of silica and regret that coats the back of your throat and reminds you, with every single breath, that you are a long way from home and even further from help. It was late afternoon, the time of day when the dual suns of this godforsaken rock hang low and heavy on the horizon, painting the Badlands in shades of bruised purple and dried blood. I was cleaning my instruments, wiping down a scalpel that had seen more use in the last month than it was designed for in a lifetime. The rubbing alcohol stung my nose, a sharp, clean chemical scent cutting through the pervasive smell of ozone, diesel fumes, and the metallic tang of dried mud. I didn't mind the quiet. In my line of work, silence is usually a blessing. It means nobody is screaming, nobody is dying, and nobody is asking me to perform miracles with a roll of expired gauze and a bottle of cheap whiskey. But silence out here in the Rim territories is also a liar. It tells you you're safe right before the storm hits. If you've spent enough time on the line, if you've worn the boots and carried the rifle, you know the difference between peace and the calm before the hammer drops. It's a feeling in your gut. A low-frequency vibration in your bones, the kind of instinct that keeps old soldiers alive while the young ones are still reading the manual. If you know that feeling, the way the hair on the back of your neck stands up when the wind shifts just a fraction of a degree, then you know exactly why I kept a loaded .45 caliber sidearm next to my medical kit, safety off, round in the chamber. The clinic itself wasn't much to look at. It was a converted supply depot, reinforced with corrugated steel and sandbags, a testament to the stubbornness of the settlers who refused to let this planet kill them. The walls were lined with shelves cluttered with scavenged tech, jars of local herbs and medical texts that were out of date 20 years ago. The air recycler hummed in the corner, a rhythmic wheezing sound like an old man trying to catch his breath. I sat in my leather chair, one of the few luxuries I had brought with me from the core worlds, and watched the dust motes dance in the shaft of light cutting through the blinds. I was tired, not the kind of tired that a good night's sleep fixes, but the deep, marrow-deep exhaustion that comes from seeing too much, doing too much, and saving too little. They call it combat fatigue in the manuals. Out here, we just call it Tuesday. The door to the clinic didn't open so much as it was forced inward by a weight that shouldn't have been moving at all. The heavy steel hinges groaned in protest, a screech of metal on metal that shattered the silence. She stood there framed by the blinding white light of the doorway, a silhouette that looked less like a woman and more like a wreckage salvaged from a battlefield. It was Ronin. I'd seen her around the settlement for the past week, a drifter who moved with the kind of heavy, deliberate grace that screams combat veteran. She didn't talk much. In fact, I hadn't heard her say 2 words since she arrived. She was the type who let her presence do the talking, and right now her presence was screaming that she was dead on her feet. She took one step, then another, her heavy combat boots dragging deep furrows in the wooden floorboards. Every movement seemed to cost her a piece of her soul. I didn't need a medical scanner to see the damage, I needed a mop. Her armor, a battered composite of unfamiliar design that looked like it had been through a meat grinder, was cracked wide open across the torso. Beneath the jagged, smoking ceramic plates, the flesh was a ruin. But it wasn't human flesh. It was a deep bruised indigo, tough as cured leather but torn open now. Dark, viscous violet blood was pulsing out with a rhythm that was far too slow and far too weak. It wasn't just a wound. It was an eviction notice from the land of the living. She was running on fumes, willpower, and pure, unadulterated spite. I moved before I thought about it. Decades of field medicine take the thinking out of the equation. You see the blood, you stop the blood. It's a binary state, life or death, action or inaction. I grabbed a trauma kit from the counter and kicked a wheeled gurney toward her, the metal casters rattling on the floor. "Get on the table," I barked. My voice was rough, the voice of a man who's given the same order 1,000 times in 1,000 bad places, from the mud pits of Centauri to the ice trenches of Orion. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a command. Ronin stopped. She swayed like an old oak tree in a gale, listing dangerously to the left, but she didn't fall. She looked at me, her eyes, burning gold and lacking whites, glowing with a feverish intensity from beneath a helmet that had been half melted by what looked like heavy plasma fire. She raised a hand, her gauntlet trembling, not to reach for help but to ward me off. A barrier, a denial. "Do not," she rasped. The words sounded like gravel grinding together, but with a strange harmonic undertone common to her species. "Do not heal me." The request was absurd, it was insanity. The warrior was leaking her life out onto my clean floorboards. I ignored her. You get used to delirium in this job. Shock makes soldiers say stupid things. It scrambles the brain, makes them think they're back home or that they're invincible or that they're already dead. I stepped closer, reaching for the release clasps on her ruined breastplate, my hands moving with practiced speed. Save the speech for the chaplain girl. You're bleeding out and I don't have time to argue theology with a corpse. Ronin moved faster than a dying woman had any right to. Her hand shot out and clamped around my wrist. Her grip was iron, the kind of strength that doesn't come from muscles but from a bone-deep refusal to yield. Her physiology was denser than a human's, heavier, built for high gravity and war. It was the grip of someone who has held onto life by her fingernails for so long that she doesn't know how to let go, even when she wants to. No, she growled. Her golden eyes locked onto mine, and for a second the fever cleared, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. It is forbidden, a warrior's death. I earned it. Do not take it from me. She was serious, dead serious. I looked into those eyes, alien, ancient eyes set in a face of blue granite scarred by a lifetime of violence. And I saw a code of honor that was as archaic as it was inconvenient. She wasn't delirious, she was a zealot. She believed that dying here, standing up bleeding into the dust of a nameless planet, was somehow better than surviving to fight another day. I've seen that look before, usually on young lieutenants from the academy who read too many heroic stories and never had to hold their own intestines in while waiting for a medevac that wasn't coming. But Ronin wasn't young, she was scarred, weathered, beaten. She should have known better. That's the tragedy of war. Sometimes it twists a warrior's pride until it becomes the weapon that kills them. I didn't have time to debate philosophy. Every second we stood there locking horns was a second her heart's. I assumed she had two, judging by the vascular pressure, struggled to pump blood that wasn't there. I don't care what you earned, I said, looking her dead in the eye, matching her intensity. My clinic, my rules. And in my clinic, nobody dies unless I say so. You want to die? Go do it outside in the dirt with the vermin. But in here you fight. I twisted my wrist, breaking her grip with a leverage trick an old drill sergeant major had taught me. It was a move designed to disarm a heavy opponent without hurting them, relying on mechanics rather than strength. Ronin stumbled back, surprise flickering across her alien features. She tried to raise her other arm, maybe to strike me, maybe to draw the massive battered blade at her hip. But her body finally betrayed her. The adrenaline crash hit her like a freight train. Her knees buckled. She didn't crumple. She sank, trying to stay upright until the very last second, fighting gravity just as hard as she fought me. Do not, she whispered, the command losing its edge as her eyes rolled back. I warned, you, and then she was down. The giant fell. The sound of her armor hitting the floor was heavy, a dull thud that shook the jars on the shelves. I didn't waste a second. I didn't pause to reflect. I hauled her onto the table, the sheer dead weight of her testing my own back. This wasn't just a woman, she was dense, heavy with muscle and gear, built like a tank. I grunted with the effort, feeling my own old injuries flare up. The bad disc in my spine, the shrapnel in my knee. But I ignored them. Pain is just information. It tells you you're working. I cut away the armor using heavy industrial shears to snap the reinforced straps. I tossed the expensive ruined plating into the corner where it clattered into a heap. The undersuit peeled away, revealing the damage in all its ugly glory. The wound was jagged, a tear from the hip to the ribcage, cauterized in spots by extreme heat but tearing open with every breath she took. Whatever hit her should have cut a human in half. It looked like a glancing blow from a heavy repeater. I grabbed the biofoam canister and the surgical stapler. This wasn't going to be pretty surgery. This wasn't the sterile robotic precision of the core worlds where machines do the work. This was meatball mechanics, this was trench medicine. You patch the tire so the truck can keep moving. You stop the leak so the ship doesn't sink. I worked with the efficiency of a machine, cleaning, packing, sealing. My hands were steady, they always are. It's only afterward, late at night, when the adrenaline fades and the silence comes back, that the shakes start. I could feel the old ghosts watching me from the shadows of the room. Every soldier I couldn't save. Every good man and woman who died for a bad cause. They were all there, standing in the corners, judging the stitches. If you've carried that kind of weight, if you've looked at a graveyard and known you put half the names there, you understand why I couldn't let Ronin die. One more death wasn't just a statistic, it was a failure. It was a surrender, and I don't surrender. She started to thrash when I hit the deep tissue with the coagulant. Even unconscious, her body fought the intrusion. It was instinct, the predator refusing to be touched. She groaned, a low, harmonic sound of fury that vibrated in her chest. I had to strap her down, tightening the leather restraints across her chest and legs. I hated doing it. It reminded me of the interrogation rooms back during the rebellion. Places I tried very hard to forget. But she was strong enough to break my nose or knock over the instrument tray even in her sleep. I stitched the wound, pulling the tough blue skin tight, layering the synthetic dermis over the raw muscle. The needle pierced the hide with a small popping sound, tougher than human skin by a long shot. In, out, pull, a rhythm of repair. Stay down, you stubborn mule, I muttered, wiping sweat from my eyes with a bloody forearm. The heat in the clinic was rising, the cooling unit struggling against the afternoon sun. I'm not letting you quit that easy. You don't get off the hook today. It took an hour of digging shrapnel out of a warrior who wanted to keep it. An hour of fighting death for a prize that didn't want to be won. When I was done, I was exhausted. I stripped off my gloves, throwing them into the incinerator bin, and slumped into my chair. The leather creaked under my weight, a familiar, comforting sound. I watched the vitals monitor. Her heart rate was slow, powerful, rhythmic like a heavy drum. Thump, thump, thump. It was the heartbeat of a survivor. She would live. She would hate me for it, she would curse me, but she would live. I poured myself a drink, the cheap amber liquid looking like liquid sunlight in the dim clinic. I didn't turn on the lights. I sat there in the dark, listening to the wind howl outside. It's a lonely sound, the wind on the frontier. It sounds like voices you can't quite hear. I thought about Ronin's words. A warrior's death. It sounded noble in a poem. It sounded glorious in a recruiting poster. In reality, it's just a body cooling in the mud while the flies gather, while the people who loved you cry, and the politicians who sent you shuffle papers and redraw maps. I learned that lesson the hard way at the Battle of Seraphim Ridge. We held the line for 3 days against a force 10 times our size. No ammo, no water, just grit and rocks. They called us heroes afterward. They pinned medals on our chests, gave us parades. But medals don't stop the nightmares. Medals don't bring back the boys who bled out screaming for their mothers in the dark. Survival isn't pretty. It's ugly, it's painful, and it requires you to get up the next morning, look in the mirror, and do it all over again. That's the hard truth most people don't want to hear. But if you're reading this, if you've lived long enough to have scars of your own, if you've buried friends and carried on, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You know that survival is the ultimate act of defiance. Ronin woke up 4 hours later. The suns had set, and the clinic was bathed in the soft blue glow of the emergency lights. She didn't groan. She didn't ask, "Where am I?" She didn't panic. She just sat up. The heavy leather straps I had used to secure her snapped like dry twigs under her sudden exertion. She swung her legs over the side of the table and stared at the white bandages wrapping her torso, contrasting sharply against her indigo skin. Her face was a mask of cold fury carved from stone. She looked at me, and for a moment I thought she was going to kill me. She reached for her sidearm, realized it was on the counter across the room where I had placed it, and settled for glaring a hole through my skull with those unnerving gold eyes. "You," she said. The word was an accusation, heavy with betrayal. "You denied me." "I saved you," I corrected, not moving from my chair. I kept my hand near my own holster, resting on the grip of my .45, casual-like but ready. There's a difference. "I was finished," Ronin spat. She slid off the table, her feet hitting the floor with a heavy thud. She winced slightly as the fresh stitches pulled tight, but she ignored the pain with a discipline that was frankly terrifying. My fight was done. I had struck the blow. I was ready to join my ancestors. "You have trapped me here. You have anchored a ghost to a corpse." She stood up to her full height, towering over the medical equipment, a statue of alien muscle and rage. Why? Why drag a broken weapon back from the fire? What purpose does this serve? "Because the fire isn't out yet," I said calmly, taking a sip of my drink. I gestured to the window with the glass. Outside, the darkness was absolute, save for the distant, flickering lights of the perimeter fence. "You took out a scout party, didn't you? That's how you got chewed up. You didn't get those burns from a training accident." Ronin paused. She looked surprised that I knew, her eyes narrowing. "They were Viper Clan slavers. Raiders of the worst kind. I know who they are," I said, my voice hardening. "And I know how they work. I fought them on New Jericho. You kill a scout, they don't just go home and mourn. They track the killer. They come back with the whole battalion. They come back to burn everything to the ground to prove a point. They deal in terror, not just theft. I stood up, feeling my joints pop, staring her down. You wanted a warrior's death? Fine, that's easy. But if you died out there today, this whole settlement dies tomorrow. The women, the kids, the farmers, the old folks who came here just to find a patch of dirt to call their own. They don't have armor, they don't have rifles. They just have us. You really want to explain to your ancestors that you let them burn because you were too proud to take a few stitches? Is that the story you want told? Ronin went silent. The anger didn't leave her face, but it changed. It shifted from hot rage to cold calculation. She looked at the bandages, then at the window, then at me. I could see the gears turning behind those dark eyes. She was a hard woman, maybe the hardest I'd ever met, but she wasn't a fool. She understood duty. She understood the weight of responsibility. The Vipers, she murmured, her voice dropping to a low rumble. There were many, I killed 6. There are 50 more. Maybe 60 heavy weapons. Walkers. 50, I repeated. I checked the load in my pistol, sliding the magazine out and snapping it back in. 7 rounds plus 2 spare mags. Not enough, not nearly enough. Well, that's going to be a long night. Ronin walked over to her pile of gear. She picked up the breastplate, inspecting the damage. It was useless, slagged metal. She tossed it aside with a clang and picked up her rifle. She checked the action, the metallic clack-clack sounding loud and aggressive in the small room. She began to strip the weapon, cleaning it with a rag she found on the counter, her movements precise, ritualistic. You are a medic, she said, not looking at me, her focus entirely on the mechanism of death in her hands. You are a healer. You are not a soldier. I was a soldier before I was a medic, I said, walking over to the gun locker and pulling out an old kinetic shotgun. It was heavy, ugly, and reliable, just like me. And I was a soldier long after I stopped being one. You don't unlearn how to hold the line. You don't forget the sound of incoming fire. She looked at me then, really looked at me. She saw the gray in my beard, the way I stood, feet apart, balanced, the calluses on my hands, the scars on my arms. She saw the kinship. We were 2 old dogs from different wars barking at the same dark. We were the last line of defense in a universe that didn't care if we lived or died. Do not slow me down, Ronin said. It was the closest thing to a thank you. I was going to get it was an acceptance. Try to keep up, I replied, racking the slide of the shotgun. We spent the next hour preparing. We turned the clinic into a fortress. We boarded up the windows with heavy plasteel sheets I kept in the back. We moved the heavy medical scanners against the door to create a barricade. We laid out ammo, water, and stim packs. We worked in silence, a synchronized dance of preparation. No orders needed to be given, we both knew the drill. Create fields of fire, secure the perimeter, establish fallback points. The Vipers came at midnight. They didn't come with a roar. They came with the stealth of snakes, true to their name. They slithered through the perimeter fence, disabling the sensors, cutting throats in the dark, but we were waiting. Ronin had positioned herself on the clinic roof, a vantage point that covered the main street of the settlement. I was in the doorway, using the heavy steel frame as cover, my shotgun resting on a sandbag. The first shot cracked the silence like a whip. It was a single, thunderous report from Ronin's rifle. A raider who had been creeping toward the generator dropped, his chest a smoking ruin. Then all hell broke loose. The night lit up with plasma trails and tracer fire. It was chaotic, loud, and brutal. The air filled with the scream of energy weapons and the heavy thud of kinetics. It was the kind of fight where you don't think, you just react. Muscle memory takes over. I fired, took cover, pumped the shotgun, fired again. Boom clack, boom clack. Each shot kicked into my shoulder, a familiar bruising rhythm. I saw Ronin working the roof like a conductor of an orchestra of violence. She was efficient, no wasted movement. Every time her rifle barked, an enemy fell. She was injured, bleeding beneath those bandages, her body screaming in protest, but she fought with a cold, terrifying precision. She wasn't fighting for glory anymore. She was fighting for extermination, but there were too many of them. 50 men against 2 is a math problem with only one solution. They started to flank us, pushing through the side alleys, setting fire to the supply shed to create a distraction. The smoke rolled in, thick and acrid, stinging our eyes. They are pushing the left flank! Ronin's voice crackled over the short-range comms, calm, devoid of fear. I see them, I shouted back, firing into the smoke. I can't hold them all. I took a hit, a glancing blow to the shoulder from a plasma bolt that spun me around and knocked me to the floor. My shotgun skittered across the tiles out of reach. The smell of burnt synthetic fabric and seared flesh filled my nose. I gasped, trying to push myself up, but my arm wouldn't cooperate. A raider kicked the barricade down, leaping over the scanner. He was big, wearing spiked armor, a jagged vibro knife in his hand, a grin of anticipation on his face. He saw me down, unarmed, bleeding. He thought he had won. He thought I was prey. He lunged, the knife arcing down. I didn't have time to reach my backup piece. I braced myself for the end, staring death in the face one last time. But the end didn't come. A shadow dropped from the ceiling hatch above. It was Ronin. She landed between me and the knife. A wall of battered armor and resolve. She didn't use her rifle, she was too close. She caught the raider's wrist in midair with a hand that looked like it was carved from blue stone. I heard the sickening crack of breaking bone, loud even over the gunfire. The raider screamed, but the scream was cut short as Ronin delivered a single brutal punch to the throat. It was a killing blow, delivered with the casual efficiency of a woman taking out the trash. Ronin stood over me, panting, fresh violet blood seeping through her shirt where my stitches were holding her guts inside. She offered me a hand. "Get up, Doc," she growled. She used my title. Not medic, not human, not you. Doc, it was a promotion. It was respect. We are not done. The night is still young. "I'm getting too old for this," I groaned, grabbing her extended hand. She hauled me up as if I weighed nothing. "Age is a state of mind," Ronin said, turning back to the door, raising her rifle. "And pain is information. It tells you are still alive. Use it." We held the clinic for 3 hours, the longest 3 hours of my life. We fought back-to-back, a 2-person army against a horde. We used everything we had. I threw chemical compounds from the lab, blinding them with corrosive smoke and acid. Ronin used her rifle until it clicked dry, then she used the stock. Then she used her knife, then she used her fists. We bled, we sweated, we cursed. The clinic was torn apart. The shelves were smashed, the glass shattered, the walls scorched, but we didn't break. There is a bond that forms in the fire. Something stronger than friendship, deeper than blood. It's the kinship of the trench. When you look at the warrior next to you, an alien you barely know, a woman from a different world, a different species, and you know without a shadow of a doubt that she will die before she lets you fall. That changes you. It rewires your brain. It restores a piece of your soul that you thought was lost forever in the mud of some forgotten battlefield. And let me tell you, finding that kind of loyalty in a universe this cold, this indifferent, that's rare. That's a diamond in the rough. If you have someone in your life you can count on when the chips are down, really count on, you hold on to that. You protect it. You don't let go. By dawn, the shooting stopped. The suns began to crest the horizon, dual balls of fire banishing the shadows. The Vipers were broken. They had lost half their number, including their leader, whom Ronin had dispatched in a duel that I would remember for the rest of my days. They had lost the stomach for the fight. They retreated back into the wasteland, their engines whining as they dragged their wounded away, leaving their dead to the dust. The silence returned, but this time it felt different. It wasn't the silence of waiting. It was the heavy, exhausted silence of victory. I sat on the clinic steps, nursing my shoulder, watching the dust settle. Ronin sat next to me, cleaning her knife with a rag. She looked like hell. Her bandages were soaked through, dark purple blooming across the white. Her face was bruised, cut, swollen. She was favoring her left side, her breathing ragged. But she was alive, and more importantly, the settlement was alive. Lights were coming on in the houses. People were stepping out, fearful at first, then relieved, looking toward the clinic with awe. "You ripped your stitches," I said, pointing to her side with a tired gesture. Ronin looked down, shrugging slightly. "They held long enough. That is all that matters. Get inside," I sighed, standing up painfully, my knees popping. "I have to sew you up again. And I'm charging you double for the overtime." Ronin didn't argue this time. She didn't talk about a warrior's death. She stood up, sheathed her knife, and followed me into the ruined clinic. She sat on the table, the same table where she had fought me yesterday. I gathered my tools from the floor, the needle, the thread, the antiseptic. "You fight well," Ronin said quietly. The words hung in the air, solid and real. "For a medic?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "For a warrior," she corrected, meeting my gaze. "You held your ground, you did not run. You bled for strangers." "I had nowhere to run to," I said, threading the needle with steady hands. "This is my home." "You don't run from your home, you defend it." Ronin nodded slowly. "Home," she tested the word, tasting it. I have not had one in a long time. I have been a blade without a sheath. Well, I said, working the needle through the tough indigo skin of her side. You got a place to sleep here until you heal up. And I could use someone to watch the roof. The pay is lousy, the food is worse, and the whiskey is cheap, but the company is honest. Ronin looked at me. A faint smile touched the corner of her mouth, the first one I had ever seen. It changed her face, taking 10 years off the hard lines, softening the granite. Honest company, she mused. That is acceptable. That is rare. I started stitching. She didn't flinch. You know, I said, breaking the silence. You kept screaming, "Do not heal me," yesterday. You were pretty adamant about it. Ready to meet your maker. I was mistaken, Ronin said. Her voice was calm, steady, filled with a new kind of resolve. I thought my duty was to die. I thought honor was found in the end, in the final act. I thought I was useless if I could not fight. She looked out the window where the sun was rising, painting the world in gold and hope. But I see now dying is easy. Any fool can die. It takes a warrior to endure, to live with the scars, to keep fighting when the war is over, to protect. I tied off the knot and snipped the thread. Welcome back to the land of the living, Ronin. She hopped off the table, moving stiffly but under her own power. She walked to the door and looked out at the settlement she had helped save. She stood there, a guardian, a watchman, a survivor. It is a heavy burden, she said. Survival. It weighs more than armor. Yeah. I joined her at the door, handing her a mug of steaming black coffee. But somebody's got to carry it. We stood there for a long time, watching the settlement wake up. 2 old soldiers, too stubborn to die, too mean to quit. The universe is a big, dark place. It doesn't care about you. It doesn't care about your plans or your pride. It will chew you up and spit you out if you let it. But if you have a code, if you have a purpose, and if you have a brother or sister to watch your back, you can stand against the dark. You can hold the line. And that's what we did. We held the line. Some people say the age of heroes is over. They look at the news, at the chaos, at the softness of the world, and they say warriors like Ronin are relics. Dinosaurs waiting for the meteor. Maybe they're right. Maybe the world is moving on to softer things, to compromises and gray areas. But let me tell you something. When the wolves come to the door, when the lights go out and the comms go dead, nobody calls a politician. Nobody calls a lawyer. They look for the ones with gray in their beards or scars on their skin. They look for the ones who know that freedom isn't free, and that safety is bought with blood and sweat. So if you're out there, feeling like the world has passed you by, like your values don't matter anymore, listen to me. They matter more than ever. The world needs iron. It needs grit. It needs you to stand up when everyone else is sitting down. Don't let the fire go out. Keep your powder dry, keep your eyes open, and never ever apologize for being strong, because in the end, it's not about how hard you can hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done. That's how living is done. Ronin turned to me, offering her hand. A handshake, firm, calloused, and powerful. The universal language of respect. Coffee? She asked, taking a sip. Black, I said. Like my soul. She actually laughed at that. A dry, rasping sound like leaves scraping on pavement, but genuine. We walked back into the clinic, ready for whatever the day would bring. The Vipers would be back, or someone worse. The dust would never settle. The work would never be done, but we were still here. And for soldiers like us, that was victory enough.